Well, hi, LeAnne. Thank you for taking the time to talk with Dustin and I today. We're really excited to feature you as our interviewee on our latest edition of the Whiteboard, our newsletter that we send out on a semi-monthly basis. As I share with you, today's kind of topic or this edition's topic is really around rebranding, pivoting, adapting, growing, both personally and professionally. And so as we thought about that theme for this edition, given the work that you and I have done in the past, I thought of nobody better with that. For the benefit of our viewers, I'll give kind of my take on an intro for you, but then would like to jump in and have you share a bit of your background and maybe reflect on the theme as a starting point. But for everybody else who's kind of viewing, LeAnne Stewart is the Chief Financial Officer of Axia Women's Health, one of the largest healthcare organizations in the U.S. that's solely focused on women's health. During LeAnne's tenure, they've grown to serving in over 6 states and continue to grow. And LeAnne leads not just the finance and accounting functions, but also revenue cycle, IT, and a number of other departments, depending on the day and what the need is, since she joined in I believe, 2018, right, LeAnne?
Correct. May of 18.
Yeah. And so the organization has gone through a lot, and candidly, your career, you've been able to go through a lot. And so that's really we'd like to hear. So if you don't mind, can you share a bit of your background and then even how you got into Axia and how you've had to change with Axia over the years?
Sure. So if I take it way back, and the reason I'm doing this is it ties into what I'm doing now, is I am one of 3 sisters, the oldest of 3 sisters. I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. I went to a women's college. And then I headed off into my career adventures, which included public accounting. I was the CFO of a couple multi-billion-dollar publicly held companies and have since been the CFO of a handful of private equity sponsored companies, more recently in healthcare services. I've landed at Axia going back to that original thing that I talked about. Women-centric missions are super, super important to me. And when I was approached by the recruiters around this opportunity, I thought this is an interesting way for me to be able to continue my career in a different way, different challenges for a company like this than I'd experienced in my past, but also for a way for me to double down, if you will, on women-centric missions. And you described us, we're a women's healthcare company. We are unique in a lot of ways in that we're very focused on providing an all-inclusive healthcare opportunity for the women that are our patients. And I love what we're doing and what we're building. It's really fun.
Yeah, and it's as a group that's been able to work with you, particularly at Axia, it's been fun to be part of that and on the sidelines, assisting and cheering on. So, with that, you talked a little bit about your background, and I know from our conversations, it's varied. You've done everything from construction and some of the other public companies that you mentioned, but also then getting into healthcare and even within that, having a variety of sizes and flavors within healthcare. Always hard to boil something down to 1 or 2 situations, but have there been any, true pivotal moments in your career in how you approach work and life that have led you down this path?
I say this and it doesn't sound very professional, but there is an element of my career that is me making it up as I went along. I'm the first in my family to go to college, and I kind of had to figure that out by myself because my parents couldn't guide me toward Ivy League schools or Big Ten schools or whatever, because that wasn't a world that they knew. And so I needed to figure that out after me, my sisters did. But I would say that I've approached my career in a similar fashion in that I've been opportunistic. I've been very observant of what went on around me and to some degree followed others because I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing, but okay, those people seem to know what they're doing. So I'm going to head down that path and hopefully I end up in a good place. And I have no regrets. I have enjoyed every aspect of my career in all of its interesting twists and turns, learned a lot along the way. But it's really been opportunistic and taking advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you.
I think good advice for anybody is, staying on that kind of trajectory. Have there been, I guess, how different have the changes been as you've gone through your career, from the industries or just types of leadership teams that you're working through?
Every situation and opportunity is different, but there's always a common theme that you can find. One of the going back to, I started at EY and I had just about every type of client that you could have from an industry perspective, and from really, really big to really, really small. And one of the things that has been a bit of a hallmark of my career since then is that I've really appreciated those different opportunities. And if I think about when I had my accounting degree, the way I thought about it is accounting is accounting. And then ultimately I got my MBA from the Wharton School, and finance is finance. How you're able to apply accounting and finance and, then experiences beyond that to the particular industries is what I think is fun. And learning about different companies and what makes them tick has been a really a fun part for me intellectually as I've pursued my various twists and turns in my career path.
So, just reflecting on even what you talked about, I imagine some of that is the advice that you give to your own team or other leaders as you interact with them about how to adapt through their career. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say both, this and the previous question around being opportunistic is, combine that with wanting to continually learn. I'm a big believer of life is just one long experience in learning, and being curious and asking questions that you might actually think or be nervous about asking. We all hear there's no such thing as a stupid question, but we all worry about asking a stupid question. Just ask it. I mean, even in my role today as the CFO, I ask questions because I can pretty much guarantee there's somebody else in the room that wants to ask it and they just don't. And, if some people think it's a stupid question, that's their problem, not mine. I've learned something.
And sometimes we know there are some questions that maybe should have been taken offline, but
true. And I can suggest that. Why don't we take this one offline?
Yeah. And I think that's good advice for those that are currently in leadership positions, but also those that are kind of entering the workforce, because as we know, today's environment is not the same environment that it was even 5 years ago. So those that are entering the workforce have to probably be a little more nimble and adaptable in their careers. And so maybe going in on that adaptation or what the future looks like, I'm curious from where you sit in the world. We would agree that change is inevitable. What do you see as potential changes in the future, even short term, as we think about an office of the CFO, or and then beyond that, maybe healthcare or other industries that you pay attention to?
From my perspective, there is no question that the world is continuing to move faster and faster all the time. And so being nimble in how you think about things, how you problem solve, and how you make decisions is really important. The world has become much more data driven than it was when I was younger in my career. And generally, I think that's a fabulous thing. Decisions made by data are important. But you also have to be practical and kind of let your gut kick in from time to time, because you can just drown in analysis paralysis. We've all heard that before. I see it all the time. At some point, you just gotta say, all right, I have what I need. This is what I think we ought to do. CFOs are continued to be challenged, I would say, to expand outside of what might traditionally have been the CFO role of the future or of the past, where it was, pretty focused on the world of finance. Most CFOs today that are effective and further, I think, really enjoy their jobs, have their fingers in a lot of different things and their ears open to everything, because you've got to be one of the people that's sitting at the table with the other members of the executive team, thinking about where's the company going? How do we drive it in that direction? How do we prioritize in order to achieve those goals? So you've got to have a strategic hat. You've got to have an operations hat. You've got to have a lot of other talents, if you will, to be able to add to that overall, to your overall effectiveness as a CFO.
I think very safe. And I echo what you've said about the data remark. One of the things that I know that you took on when you came into Axia was actually implementing what I believe you call a decision support function, and building up analytics to support decision making, not just in the finance function, but beyond into operations. But it kind of houses under you. Mm-hmm. So that concept of using data and data driven decision making absolutely exists in healthcare, and even the other industries that you've worked in. Do you see anything else that's changed, or looking out, you think organizations in these industries need to be on top of or looking for?
In healthcare, specifically, I believe everyone realizes that the cost of healthcare in the United States it's untenable. And so there's a focus, an increasing level of focus on how do we be more thoughtful around the cost of healthcare, delivering the care that's needed in the most cost-effective way, but also making sure that we're taking care of the patients. That to me is it's certainly a force that exists right now, but that's going to continue to spiral. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you see more and more different types of companies and capabilities entering the healthcare space that will influence what this ultimately looks like. I remember when I first joined the world of healthcare, if you will, people talked about the fact that the pace of change in healthcare is slow. And that's probably still arguably true, but it's faster and faster all the time. So that to me is the challenge and the focus for all of us in the world of healthcare. And then how do we bring in, how do we widen the conversations around healthcare and the delivery of healthcare and the effectiveness of healthcare such that we can continue to improve beyond where we're at right now?
And so that widening, bringing stakeholders, whether they be payers or providers, the actual maybe management entities behind them, all of that into the conversation, focused on the same kind of mission as opposed to disparate goals.
Exactly. And it has to be all of those constituencies working together, because no one person or entity or aspect is going to solve it all. We've got to be working together collectively around how to do it. And then we also, frankly, just there has to be conversations around that people don't want to necessarily hear around the value and is it worth it? And those are things that people don't necessarily like to think about or talk about when it comes to their healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. Turning it around, I guess, a little self-serving, but not bashful about it. We're an advisory shop. And so we work with organizations like yourself and focus on how do we help good companies get better? How do we help them stay on the forefront of change and continue to adapt their business models for growth? Having had the privilege of working with you, how do you think service providers, whether it's us or other types of groups, can really stay relevant for their clients?
The greatest benefit that I believe third parties can bring to a company is other views, other perspectives. It's easy, well, it can be easy in a company to get sort of wrapped up in your own stuff and not really being aware of what's going on in the greater world. And so to bring new ideas, ask that question. Have you thought about this? Have you looked at that? That to me is a really important part of what a company like yours can do. Certainly you and your team have helped me on more specific tactical kinds of things that needed to do. I mean, you and I first met each other when it was jumpstart the finance organization, when we couldn't close the books, for heaven's sakes. And so that's the other thing, is being a resource because I can't tell you how many times I've run into similar situations in all of my roles where you just need help, and being able to feel confident in a third-party provider, a consultant that can come in and fill roles for you and help you think through what it should look like. Like using Axia as an example, we were a pretty small company. We were building it, we were creating it, and a thought partner in what it should look like a year from now, 2 years from now. And obviously that all continues to evolve and grow, but being able to help people think through those kinds of things, not only the crisis of the day or the problem of the moment, but what might you want to be thinking around 2 years from now, 5 years from now.
Yeah. I think we've been part of a lot of those conversations with you. I can say personally and professionally, it's been a lot of fun to help with that and beyond jumpstarting the finance organization and getting to that strategic level as we were able to help bolster the team around you has been a lot of fun. I guess I come back to that opportunity doesn't exist for everybody, and it doesn't necessarily even exist for those kind of entering the workforce itself. I'm a little removed from it, you're a little removed from it, but as I think about hiring people, I try to think about those that can fit into that role, or has a mindset that they're ready to adapt and grow. Are there any kind of key characteristics or things that you think about when you look at hiring people to support an organization like yours?
Yes, there's a number of things. I mentioned the word curious earlier today. That is an important word to me. Courageous is another one. And that might sound a little like, why do you need to be courageous in your career? But we also talked about adaptability earlier today. Being able to adapt and sort of go with the flow in your career, in your job, I think is really important from the perspective that you're going to grow and develop as an individual, and the company's going to benefit from the talents that you have that might not necessarily have been identified, or even been identified in the individual, but equally not been identified as being needs for the organization, because every organization is growing and evolving in what they need. We talk about at Axia, our COO Liz coined this, being comfortable with ambiguity. And if I think about that more specifically, I have hired multiple people where I've said, this is the job description. This is what I think this role is. But I'm hiring you to help me figure out what this role really should be, because we're still figuring it out. And
it's the struggle of crafting a job description for something that's going to change in 3 months.
Right. And some people are really uncomfortable with that. I don't like this job. I don't want this job because I don't have a job description. Or I'm doing things that aren't in this job description. Well, you can have that approach, but I think you're going to be limiting your ability to grow and develop as a person and in your career.
Yeah. Definitely in your organization, you're not hiring somebody to be a cook and they're going to cook forever. Right? You're really looking for a nimble person.
And they've got a role then in, you've heard me say what we're building here, what we're creating here. They have a role in doing that. They're not just doing what I tell them that I think they ought to do. They've got a role in building and creating it alongside me.
Do you think there's any influence to that, or is that part of like a company's brand? Like, as there's the go-to-market side of a brand, but then there's like the internal component of brand.
I don't know that I've really thought about that a lot, but I would say yes. I might more naturally go to the word culture before I go to brand, but to me, culture and brand are intertwined in a very significant way.
Sure.
Axia has a culture of creativity and working together to build what it is that we're creating here. And that is embedded in our brand and how we go to market.
I'll go to the topic that everybody talks about over the last 2 years. COVID rocked everything, and I know it impacted even Axia's method of service delivery and how you work and interact with patients. Do you think that had any actual impact on the brand itself, and either positive or, say neutral or less than neutral?
I don't honestly think so. Well, for those of us that work in Axia, I believe it will have influenced our view of Axia and consequently what the brand Axia means. To the external party, I don't know that it's as obvious, because one of the things that, well, you know what, I'm gonna backtrack on that. As I think through some of the things that we went through and we dealt with COVID, one of the primary things from a patient perspective is we wanted to make sure that our patients felt safe. Obviously, that they were getting good patient care. I think that was kind of a given before, but that they also just felt safe when they came to our care centers. I believe that COVID has embedded that into our brand in a way that it may not have been before.
That's a great way to think about it. And I know, having been under the hood a little bit, some of the service delivery, if you will, was able to change a little bit. The introduction of some telehealth and how we go about interacting with patients and prioritization of needs happen. So I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate it. I guess, the notion of rebranding, growth, rebirth, change, whatever you want to call it. I call it. I grew up in Arizona, so it's I have the image of the phoenix in my head, and how does somebody change with that? Any other thoughts that you would pass along, either to other executives and leaders, whether they're CFOs or those that are kind of coming up in their careers?
It's fun. Embrace it, roll with it, keep an open mind. You never know what life is going to present to you. And if you just keep rolling with it, you'll be amazed at where you go.
Well, LeAnne, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to have a quick little chat with us today about your experience with change, growth, adaptation, and look forward to sharing our continued change and upcoming rebranding with you as well.
I appreciate the time as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.